There's an interesting phenomena about states of consciousness. They come and they go. They're temporary. Even great peak experiences or altered states, no matter how profound, will come, stay a bit or a while, and then pass. No matter how wonderful their capacities, they are temporary. Where states of consciousness are temporary, levels or stages of development or stages of consciousness can be permanent. Levels or stages represent the actual milestones of earned growth and development and awareness. Now, stages of development are not like rigid rungs in a ladder. They're more like concentric circles, and will usually have a center of gravity that includes the prior and the next emerging stage. Yet once we are at a stage, it is an enduring acquisition. For example, once a child develops through the linguistic stages of development, the child has permanent access to that language. Language isn't present 1 minute and then gone the next. The same thing happens with other types of growth. Once we stably reach a stage of growth and development, we can access the capacities of that stage or level, such as greater consciousness, more embracing care and concern, higher ethical intuitions or callings, greater intelligences or awarenesses, virtually any time we want. Passing states have been converted to permanent traits. A lot of humans have asked, well, how many stages of development are there? In any map, the way we divide and represent the actual territory is somewhat arbitrary. For example, how many degrees are there between freezing and boiling water? If you use a centigrade scale or quote-unquote map, there are 100 degrees between freezing and boiling. Yet if you use a Fahrenheit scale, freezing is at 32 and boiling is around 212. And so there are 180 degrees between them, which is right. Both of them. It just depends on how we want to orient or measure or divide that which we're interacting with. The same is true for levels or stages of development. There are all sorts of ways to slice development, and therefore there are all sorts of levels or stage conceptions, and all of them can be useful. In the chakra system, for example, there are traditionally known as 7 major stages or levels of consciousness, yet now some would say that it's 9 or even more. Gene Gebser, the famous anthropologist, used 5. He named them in this order, from archaic to magic to mythic to rational, and then into integral. Other Western psychological models have 8, 12, or even more levels of development, which is right, all of them. It just depends on what you want to keep track of in your growth and development. Levels or stages of development also are referred to levels of development. The idea being that each stage represents a level of organization or a level of complexity. For example, in the sequence from atoms to molecules, to cells, to organisms, each of those stages of evolution involves greater complexity, greater allurement, greater intimacy, greater attraction. The word level is not meant to be a rigid or exclusionary word or concept. It's simply to indicate that there are important emergent qualities that tend to come into being in a discrete or quantum-like fashion. These developmental jumps or levels are important aspects of many natural phenomena. Generally, in the integral model, we can become aware and work with around 8 to 10 stages or levels of consciousness development. Some of the level or stage conceptions that we will use often include those by self-development pioneers like Jane Lovinger and Susan Cook-Greuter, Spiral Dynamics by Don Beck and Chris Cowan, and Orders of Consciousness researched by Harvard's Robert Keegan. There are many other useful stage conceptions available with an integral approach, and we can adopt any of them that are appropriate to our situation in life. Here's a simple example to show what is involved in a stage development. We can look at a line, which we'll talk about soon, and we're going to use the example of the line of moral intelligence. This is the way that care and concern evolves or develops. So to show what is involved with levels or stages, let's use a very simple model processing only 3 of them in moral intelligence. When we look at moral development, for example, we find that an infant at birth has not yet been socialized into the culture's ethics and conventions. This is known as the pre-conventional stage. It's also called egocentric, in that the infant's awareness is largely self-absorbed, still embedded in the environment. Yet as the young child begins to learn its culture's rules and norms, it grows into the conventional stage of morals. This is also called ethnocentric, in that it centers on the child's particular group, tribe, clan, or nation, and it therefore tends to exclude those not of one's group, tribe, clan, or nation. At the next major stage of moral development, the post-conventional stage, the individual's identity and care and concern expands once again, this time to include a care and concern for all peoples, regardless of their color, sex, or creed, which is why this stage is also called world-centric. Thus, moral development tends to move from me, egocentric, to us, ethnocentric, to all of us, world-centric. A good example of the unfolding levels or stages of consciousness. Another way to picture these 3 stages is as body, mind, and spirit. Those words all have many valid meanings, yet when used specifically referred to levels or stages, they mean this. Stage 1, which is dominated by our physical body, it is the body stage, using body in its typical meaning of the physical body, since we are identified merely with the separate self bodily organism and its survival drives. This is also called the me stage. Stage 2, the mind stage, where identity expands from the isolated physical body and it starts to share relationships with others based perhaps on shared values, mutual interests, common ideals, or shared dreams. Because we can use the mind to take the perspective or role of others, that is, to put ourselves in their shoes and feel what it is like to be them to some degree, our personal identity expands from me to us, the move from egocentric to ethnocentric. With stage 3, our identity expands once again, this time from an identity of us to an identity with all of us, the move from ethnocentric to world-centric. And here we begin to comprehend that in addition to the wonderful diversity of humans and cultures, there are also similarities and shared commonalities. And discovering the commonwealth of all beings is the move from ethnocentric to world-centric and is spiritual in the sense of things common to all sentient beings on earth. That is one way to view the unfolding from the body to the mind to the spirit, where each of them is considered at a level or a stage or a wave of unfolding care and consciousness, moving from egocentric to ethnocentric to world-centric. All that is required right now for a comprehension of levels or stages is to recognize that there is a progression and permanent milestones along the evolutionary path of our own unfolding, whether we talk of levels or stages of consciousness, stages of energy, stages of culture, stages of spiritual realization, stages of moral development, and so on. We are talking of these important and fundamental center of gravities in the unfolding of our higher, deeper and wider potentials. Because learning the integral map induces a somewhat psychoactive effect, we will over time perhaps automatically be prompted to check in and see if we have included the important levels or stage aspects of any situation, which will dramatically increase our likelihood of success, whether that success be measured in terms of personal transformation, social change, excellence in business, care for others, or deeper pleasure and satisfaction in our lives.